Welcome to Hope Stories. Sometimes the most terrifying battles are not fought on distant battlefields, but within the walls of our own homes. Imagine a place meant to be filled with warmth, safety, and love. Yet behind closed doors, it hides a truth so cruel it threatens to shatter everything a family believes in. What happens when innocence collides with betrayal? When a child's quiet suffering exposes a darkness no one dared to name? This is not just a story about cruelty, but about resilience, courage, and the power of truth to break through silence. It will challenge what you think you know about love, loyalty, and justice. And as the layers peel back, you'll be forced to ask yourself, what would you do if the person you trusted most became the one you feared the deepest? Now let's step into the story that will take you on that emotional journey. Michael had always believed his home was a sanctuary. A sprawling suburban house with wide oak floors and sunlit windows, it was the kind of place neighbors admired, a symbol of security and comfort. But that illusion began to crack on a quiet Sunday evening when he walked into the kitchen and saw something he couldn't unsee. Emily, his 8-year-old daughter from his first marriage, sat hunched on the cold tile floor, clutching a chipped bowl of watery soup. Her thin shoulders trembled with each spoonful, while at the table only a few feet away, Karen, his elegant new wife, and her 2 sons, Ethan and Noah, laughed over roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and sparkling juice. The contrast was grotesque, luxury and laughter on one side, hunger and silence on the other. Michael froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. He had been so buried in 12-hour workdays and endless business calls that he had taken Karen's word at face value whenever she brushed off Emily's pale cheeks or timid silences. But now, staring at his daughter, crouched on the floor like an unwelcome guest in her own home, he felt something inside him snap. "Emily, why are you eating down there?" His voice cracked more than he expected. Emily's wide eyes darted to Karen before dropping back to her bowl. Karen didn't flinch. She dabbed her lips with a linen napkin, her smile fixed, brittle, almost daring him to push further. Later that night, when the boys had gone to bed, Michael pressed for answers. Karen spun excuses, discipline, structure, teaching humility, but each explanation unraveled under its own weight. Emily's small voice finally broke the dam. Shaking, she admitted she had been forced to eat on the floor for weeks and sleep in the basement because I needed to learn my place. The words were daggers. Michael stared at his wife, a woman he had trusted with everything, and for the first time he saw the cold calculation behind her composure. Ethan and Noah, who had overheard the confession from the hallway, stood frozen, confusion and betrayal twisting their young faces. Driven by dread, Michael descended to the basement. The smell of mildew hit him first. A mattress barely fit for a stray dog lay against the wall, surrounded by damp concrete. The air was icy, the space claustrophobic. This was where his daughter had been spending her nights while he was away at business dinners, blissfully ignorant. Rage surged through him so violently he had to steady himself against the wall. The basement wasn't just a room, it was a crime scene of neglect. When he demanded to see Emily's real bedroom, Karen hesitated. Her steps faltered as they climbed to the second floor, her hands trembling as though she were being led to an execution. Michael noticed something he had never seen before, a small metal lock installed on the outside of Emily's door. His stomach churned. That lock hadn't been there before. It was not protection. It was imprisonment. He forced Karen to open it. The door groaned on its hinges, revealing a space stripped bare. The bed, the bright curtains he had chosen himself, the shelf of storybooks, even the stuffed animals he had brought back from business trips, gone. The room was nothing but dust and shadows, as if his daughter's existence had been erased. Emily stepped inside and turned slowly, her thin arms wrapped around her ribs. "Daddy, this is where I used to sleep before everything changed," she whispered. Her voice carried the weight of a child who had lost far more than possessions. Michael's fury was volcanic, but colder than fire. He demanded answers. Where were Emily's things? Karen stammered about donations, about teaching lessons in gratitude, but the lies fell flat even to her own ears. Then Emily spoke again, her voice soft but devastating. "I saw my blue dress on the neighbor's kid and some of my toys at school. She said a nice lady gave them away." The revelation hit Michael like a punch to the gut. Karen hadn't just stolen from Emily, she had humiliated her by parading generosity to others with what rightfully belonged to his daughter. Ethan, the older of Karen's boys, finally stepped forward, torn between loyalty and truth. "Dad, there are boxes in the attic. Mom told us not to say anything." His words sealed Karen's fate. Together they climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The musty air was thick with dust, but what lay stacked in cardboard boxes was undeniable. Emily's dresses folded neatly, toys preserved, books he remembered reading to her at night. Even framed drawings Emily had made were hidden there, suffocating in the dark. Michael's hands shook as he lifted each artifact of his daughter's stolen childhood. Emily touched her favorite pink dress with butterflies, her eyes shimmering with both joy and sorrow. "I wore this when we went to the park," she said softly. The innocence of her memory made Michael's chest ache with guilt. He realized he had been absent too long, too blind, too trusting. His empire of work had left room for cruelty to take root under his own roof. Karen began to weep, pleading for forgiveness, claiming she could change, but her words rang hollow. Even Ethan and Noah looked at her with suspicion now, their young faces etched with disappointment. And in that suffocating attic, Michael understood the truth. This wasn't negligence or stress. It was deliberate, systematic cruelty. Would you still believe in redemption if the person who betrayed your trust was the one you once loved most? Could a family truly heal after a child's innocence had been so brutally stolen? Michael's eyes burned with a terrifying clarity as he whispered to himself, holding Emily close. The reckoning had only just begun, and the house would never be the same again. Michael sat on the attic floor, surrounded by the cardboard boxes that now felt like coffins for his daughter's stolen joy. Dust swirled in the faint beam of light slicing through the cracked window, catching on the edges of Emily's drawings, smiling suns, stick figures of her and him holding hands, a crooked little house colored in crayon. Each piece of paper was both a memory and a crime scene, proof that Karen had tried to erase his daughter's life in the one place meant to protect her. His chest tightened with guilt so heavy it felt like drowning. He had trusted too blindly, let his work consume him, and now the consequence was written across Emily's hollow cheeks and trembling frame. Karen knelt a few feet away, her mascara streaking down her face as she begged, "Michael, please, you don't understand. I was trying to create order. I didn't want her spoiled. She needed discipline, boundaries." Her words were frantic, desperate, but Michael could hear the undercurrent of fear, fear of losing everything, of the empire she thought she had built around his trust. Ethan and Noah stood frozen by the attic door, their eyes darting between their mother and the man they had come to call Dad. Confusion tore through them, but something else was forming too, doubt, even shame. Michael wanted to scream, to unleash every ounce of fury he felt, but Emily's small hand slipped into his, grounding him. Her fingers were cold, fragile, yet her touch stopped him from shattering. She looked up at him with wide, searching eyes, and he saw not just fear but a silent plea. "Don't let this break us." His heart cracked open. This wasn't only about punishment. It was about redemption, about whether he could rise from his own failure and shield her now when it mattered most. He turned back to Karen. "You didn't discipline her," he said, his voice low but seething. "You tried to erase her." The attic seemed to shrink with the weight of his words. Karen lunged forward, grabbing his arm, whispering fiercely, "If you expose this, Michael, you'll destroy this family. The neighbors, the church, everyone will know. Think of Ethan and Noah. Do you want to rip their lives apart too?" It was a twisted blade she thrust at him, the choice between justice for his daughter and the stability of two boys who were innocent in all this. The silence stretched. Ethan finally broke it. "Dad," his voice cracked, uncertain but determined. "Is it true? Did Mom really do all this to Emily?" His question hung in the air like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Michael's throat tightened. There was no way to soften the truth. He could see the betrayal already etched into the boys' faces, the foundation of their trust splintering with each passing second. Emily clutched the pink dress from the box, pressing it against her chest as though reclaiming a piece of herself. "She took everything from me," she whispered, her voice trembling yet steady. Noah began to cry quietly, his small shoulders shaking as he stared at his mother with disbelief. Michael's mind raced. If he exposed Karen fully, he risked tearing apart the family dynamic forever, turning Ethan and Noah against their mother and himself for destroying the home they knew. But if he stayed silent, he would be complicit, allowing Emily's pain to be buried once more. His hands shook as he realized this wasn't just about love or anger anymore. It was about morality, about what it meant to be a father, not only to Emily, but also to two boys suddenly standing on the fault line of truth. Karen's sobs turned to defiance. She stood, straightening her blouse, her eyes flashing with a twisted pride. "You think you can just throw me out? You need me, Michael. You can't raise 3 kids alone. You'll collapse without me." Her words were venom, but beneath them was panic. Michael saw it clearly now. The woman he thought he loved was nothing more than a mask built on manipulation. And yet, for a moment, he faltered. She was right in one way. Could he really manage 3 broken children, a demanding career, and his own fractured heart? Doubt gnawed at him, whispering that maybe silence was easier. But then Emily tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, please don't let her hurt me again." That single plea snapped the last chain of hesitation. Michael rose, towering over Karen, his decision blazing in his eyes. The attic was no longer just a room of hidden boxes. It was the courtroom of his family, and he had become both judge and jury. If you were Michael, would you risk destroying the family's fragile stability to protect one child's truth, or would you sacrifice justice to preserve appearances? The night was closing in, and Michael's choice would change all of their lives forever. Stay with me as the storm that began in the attic tears through every corner of this house. Michael stood in the attic, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear free from his chest. Ethan and Noah's stunned faces mirrored the confusion clawing through his own mind. He had made a choice in his heart, Emily's safety above all else, but now reality pressed down like an iron weight. Karen wasn't finished. She never surrendered easily. And as he looked at her, standing rigid in the dusty half-light, he recognized the dangerous defiance in her eyes. She had been cornered, and cornered people strike back. Karen's voice cut through the thick silence. "If you throw me out, Michael, you'll lose more than me. You'll lose your job, your reputation. You think no one will believe me if I say you neglected Emily? If I say you left her to rot while you built your empire? Who do you think the courts will trust? A powerful businessman desperate to protect his image, or a mother claiming she did what she had to?" Her words were knives, each one aimed at the weakest spot in his armor, his guilt. For a second, Michael faltered. She wasn't wrong. He had been absent. He had failed to see the warning signs. If she weaponized that truth, he could lose Emily again, not to her cruelty this time, but to a system blind to nuance. Emily's small fingers tightened around his hand. She said nothing, but her eyes spoke with heartbreaking clarity. Don't let her win. The boys shifted uneasily. Ethan's jaw clenched, as if he was old enough to understand the stakes, but too young to shoulder them. Noah whispered, "Mom, stop." But his voice cracked with both fear and loyalty. The attic air grew suffocating. Michael felt like the walls were closing in. He wanted to protect his daughter, but could he really risk dragging all 3 children into a custody battle, into the glare of public scandal? He imagined headlines, lawyers dissecting every business trip, every night he came home too late. He could almost hear Karen spinning the story. Michael, the cold, absent father who left his little girl vulnerable. The possibility made his stomach twist, and then came the twist he hadn't prepared for. Ethan spoke, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Dad, there's something else. Mom, she told us to hurt Emily. She said if we didn't, she'd punish us too." Michael froze. The words sliced the air like thunder. Karen's face blanched, but Ethan pressed on, tears filling his eyes. "She told us to laugh when Emily was on the floor, to take her toys away. She made us part of it." His confession broke Noah, who collapsed into sobs, crying, "I didn't want to, I swear." Michael's world tilted. Rage, sorrow, and disbelief crashed over him in waves. This wasn't just Karen's cruelty anymore. It had infected the boys too, twisting them into unwilling accomplices. But as he looked at Ethan's trembling frame and Noah's tear-streaked cheeks, he realized they were victims too, ensnared in a mother's manipulation. The moral dilemma clawed at him. How could he protect Emily while not condemning Ethan and Noah, children who were as broken as his daughter, forced into complicity by fear. Karen lunged forward, her mask fully gone, her voice shrill. "They're lying, they're children, Michael. They don't know what they're saying." But her denial only deepened the silence around her. Ethan's gaze hardened, his first true act of defiance against his mother, and Michael knew in that instant there was no turning back. He saw his path clearly now, though it terrified him. Protecting Emily meant shattering everything. It meant pulling Ethan and Noah into the truth and letting them face what their mother had done, even if it broke them in the process. It meant walking into a war against Karen, not only as a husband, but as a father fighting for all three children's futures. His own career, his reputation, those were sacrifices he could live with. But the cost of silence? That would haunt him forever. Michael pulled Emily close, then extended his arm toward Ethan and Noah. "You're my sons too," he said, voice trembling but fierce, "and I will never let her use you again, any of you." The boys hesitated but slowly stepped toward him, breaking from the shadow of their mother. Karen's scream echoed in the attic, a sound of rage and desperation, but it no longer mattered. The balance had shifted. The children had chosen. What would you do if the people you needed to protect most were also those who had unknowingly harmed the one you loved? Would you forgive their weakness, or would you let the weight of betrayal tear the family apart? The attic door creaked open, and Michael knew the battle was only beginning, one that would test not just his courage, but the very soul of his family. Stay with me as the truth spills beyond these walls and threatens to consume everything in its path. The attic's silence fractured into chaos as Karen's scream ricocheted off the rafters. She lunged at Ethan, fury twisting her face, but Michael stepped between them, his arms wide as if to shield all three children with his body. For a moment, time slowed, their breaths the dust swirling in the stale air, Emily clutching her dress, Ethan's clenched fists, Noah's sobs, all pieces of a fragile world on the brink of collapse. Michael's mind raced. He had made his choice, but the consequences loomed larger than he imagined. Karen's threats weren't idle. She could destroy him in the courts, twist his failures into weapons, and strip Emily away in the name of law. He had the truth, but she had the system and the lies sharpened to cut him apart. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. The sound jolted them all, slicing through the tension like a blade. Karen froze, her eyes widening, then narrowing with sudden calculation. She wiped her face hastily and hissed, "That's the neighbor. I called her earlier. She knows everything." Panic surged in Michael. If Karen had already planted seeds of a different story, he might be walking into a trap where Emily was painted as unstable and himself as negligent. Every second mattered. Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, don't let her talk to them," she whispered, her voice sharp with fear. Michael looked at the children and saw the stakes etched on their faces. He had to decide whether to confront the neighbor and expose Karen now, or retreat into silence and gather proof later. But silence was what had allowed this nightmare to fester. His chest tightened with the weight of choice. Karen descended the stairs quickly, her tone shifting into syrupy warmth. "Come in, Martha," she called, voice ringing with false cheer. Michael followed, the children trailing behind him. At the doorway stood Martha, the well-meaning neighbor who always carried casseroles to church events, the type who trusted what she saw on the surface. Karen launched into her performance immediately. "I'm so glad you came. Michael's been under so much stress at work, and Emily, well, she's been struggling. I've done my best, but it's been so hard." Michael saw the trap snap shut. Martha's face softened with sympathy, not for Emily, but for Karen. And in that instant, he understood the true danger. Karen wasn't just cruel. She was a master manipulator who could bend reality itself. If Martha carried this narrative into the neighborhood, into the church, even into a courtroom, Michael would be painted as the villain who ignored his child until his wife had no choice but to intervene. He stepped forward, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Martha, I need you to see something." Without waiting for permission, he led her upstairs, past Karen's protests, into the attic. Ethan and Noah followed, silent but resolute, while Emily clutched his hand. When Martha's eyes fell on the boxes, Emily's clothes, toys, drawings, her smile faltered. Confusion rippled across her face. Karen tried to fill the silence with excuses about storage, about clutter, but Ethan cut her off. She made us hide them. She made us hurt Emily. His voice cracked, but his words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Martha's certainty wavered. She looked at Karen, then at Emily's trembling frame, then at Michael, whose expression carried both fury and shame. The truth had begun to bleed through the mask. But Michael knew this wasn't victory. It was only the opening shot of a war. If Martha chose to believe him, they had an ally. If she clung to Karen's story, the damage could be irreversible. Michael's hands shook as he spoke. Martha, this isn't just about me or Karen. It's about these children. What kind of people will they become if we keep pretending everything is fine? His voice broke, but he didn't look away. He couldn't. If you were Martha, standing in that attic with lies on one side and painful truth on the other, who would you believe? The night was unraveling, and with every word spoken, Michael's family teetered closer to a reckoning that could burn everything to the ground. Stay with me as the fragile line between truth and deception is pushed to its breaking point. Martha's lips parted as though she might speak, but no words came. Her eyes darted between the boxes, Emily's trembling hands, Ethan's tear-streaked face, and Karen's perfectly composed mask beginning to crack at the edges. Michael felt his chest tighten. This was the moment where truth could either breathe or be buried alive. He had shown her the evidence, but evidence was nothing if people chose not to see. Karen stepped forward, her voice honeyed but shaking underneath. Martha, you know me. You've known me for years. Do you really believe I'd ever harm a child? Michael's spinning a story because he can't handle the stress at work. He's trying to turn everyone against me. Her hand reached for Martha's arm, clinging to her like a lifeline. For a second, Michael saw doubt flicker across Martha's face, and his stomach sank. Then, unexpectedly, Noah spoke. His small voice, fragile and raw, pierced the attic's heavy silence. She told us if we didn't do what she said, she'd lock us in the basement too. His words broke like glass across the room. Martha flinched, her hand trembling as she pulled away from Karen. The power shifted again, fragile but undeniable. Michael's heart lurched with both relief and anguish. His children were testifying, but each confession tore open wounds that would take years to heal. Yet before hope could settle, Karen unleashed her final card. Her voice dropped low, venom replacing sweetness. Michael, do you really want to drag this into the courts? Because if you do, I will destroy you. I'll tell them you hit me. I'll tell them you drink. I'll tell them Emily made these stories up because she wants attention. I'll drag your name through the mud until you lose not just her, but your career, your future, everything. The attic seemed to shrink around him, the air pressing against his lungs. Michael's mind spun with visions of custody battles, lawyers tearing Emily apart on the witness stand, neighbors whispering behind their curtains. He knew Karen was capable of every lie she threatened. The system was flawed enough that her words might carry weight, no matter how false. And suddenly the question clawed at him. Was telling the truth worth risking Emily being lost in the machinery of courts and reputations? Emily's fingers clutched his hand tighter, grounding him, pulling him out of the spiral. Her voice, barely audible, whispered, "Please don't let her take me away again." His heart broke at the plea. He knew the choice before him was no longer about reputation or appearances. It was about whether he had the courage to put everything on the line for his daughter, even if the world refused to believe him. Martha finally spoke, her voice unsteady. "Karen, I don't know what's happened here, but I see fear in these children's eyes, and that doesn't come from nothing." For the first time, someone else had spoken against Karen, but Michael understood this was only a beginning. One neighbor's belief wouldn't protect them from the storm Karen promised to unleash. Karen's face hardened, her mask shattering completely. "Fine," she spat, her voice sharp as broken glass. "If you want war, Michael, then war is what you'll have." And in that moment, Michael realized the battle ahead wouldn't just be in courtrooms or whispered gossip. It would be in the fragile hearts of his children, in their ability to heal without being consumed by the darkness she had planted inside them. His fight was no longer simply to expose Karen. It was to rebuild something worth saving from the ruins she had left behind. If you were in Michael's place, Would you risk dragging your family through public scandal for the sake of truth, or try to protect them by keeping the nightmare hidden? As Karen's threat lingered in the air like smoke, Michael knew the choice he made next could either save his children or break them forever. Stay with me as the line between survival and justice grows razor thin. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a storm. Karen fought just as she had promised, twisting lies into weapons, her words sharpened to slice through reputation and trust. Michael was dragged into a whirlwind of accusations, whispered judgments, and sleepless nights filled with fear that the system might believe her carefully crafted facade. But every time he faltered, he looked into Emily's eyes and saw the truth there, raw and undeniable, and it was enough to anchor him. He refused to let the silence consume her again. The trial became a theater of shadows, each side painting their own portrait of reality. Karen sat with her lawyers, immaculate and cold, rehearsing her role as the wounded wife, but she underestimated the quiet power of children's voices. When Emily spoke, her small frame trembling in the witness chair, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Her words were not dramatic, not rehearsed, but simple, fragile truths. She described the nights in the damp basement, the hunger, the whispered threats. At one point she faltered, eyes darting to Karen as if expecting punishment, but Michael's steady gaze gave her courage. She finished her testimony with a whisper, "I just want to feel safe." That single sentence shattered the room more than any lawyer's argument ever could. Noah and Ethan too spoke. Their innocence made their words sharper than any blade. They didn't condemn their mother outright, but their stories aligned with Emily's, painting a picture of cruelty too consistent to dismiss. Even Martha, with her steady voice, spoke of the fear she had seen in their eyes that night in the attic. Piece by piece, Karen's perfect mask disintegrated, and behind it was not the image of a misunderstood mother, but of someone whose cruelty could no longer be explained away. Still, victory was not triumphant. When the final verdict came, Karen stripped of custody, her rights revoked, the courtroom felt heavy, not celebratory. Karen didn't cry, didn't plead. She stared at Michael with eyes filled not with remorse, but with a hatred that promised this was not the end. Being freed from her grip felt both like salvation and a curse, because her shadow would linger long after she was gone. Michael took the children home to a house that no longer felt haunted, but healing was not immediate. Emily still woke in the night, trembling, afraid the basement door would creak open. Noah and Ethan wrestled with guilt for having betrayed their mother, even as they clung to Michael for reassurance. And Michael himself carried a heavy burden, the guilt of not seeing sooner, of not protecting them before the damage was carved into their souls. Yet slowly, tenderness began to weave its way back into their lives. Meals were shared together at the table, where laughter, hesitant at first, grew stronger each day. Emily started to draw again, filling pages with color after months of silence. Noah and Ethan played without glancing over their shoulders. Even in their pain, something new was being born. A family stitched together not by perfection, but by survival, resilience, and a choice to love despite the scars. Months later, as autumn leaves drifted across the yard, Michael stood watching the children rebuild Emily's old room together. Boxes of hidden toys and clothes had been unpacked, not as evidence anymore, but as treasures restored to their rightful place. Emily held up a faded teddy bear, pressing it close as if reclaiming a piece of herself. Noah handed her crayons, and Ethan stuck her drawings proudly on the wall. It was imperfect, messy, and achingly beautiful. Michael felt tears sting his eyes, not just of sorrow for all that had been lost, but of gratitude for the fragile hope rising among the ruins. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily looked at him and smiled, small but real. In that moment, he knew the battle had been worth every wound. Healing would not erase the past, but it would build a future where love was stronger than cruelty, where truth had been spoken aloud, and where silence no longer had the power to destroy. Karen was gone, her voice finally silenced by the truth she had tried to bury, but her shadow would always remind them of how close they came to losing everything. And perhaps that was the final twist, not a perfect happy ending, but a life reclaimed through fire, where love became both scar and salvation. What are your feelings after following this story from beginning to end? If you enjoyed the story, comment 100 below. Tell us which country you are watching from. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching on Hope Stories.